Hi guys, go ahead and open up the red ACT English book and go to page 62. I'm going to walk you through this assignment and then we'll review it when I'm done. On page 62 and 63 we've got this long list of comma rules, and you've seen some of these through the comma video earlier. We keep returning to these as we go through the ACT question sets, and I can tell you, as a copywriter and a copy editor, to people who are writing professionally now, commas are still the biggest headache, the biggest issue, because there's so many rules to keep track of. There are some generalities that will help you sort of navigate this. The main one being that commas separate. That's the job of just about every comma usage, is that it separates. So it should make sense where you're putting it. So part of the assignment today will be to tell me why you're doing what you're doing. Now you can use the rules that are written down here. You can use your own language or language that I'll use. But we want to get into the habit of saying why we're doing particular things with grammar and punctuation, etc. Okay, so look at page 62. I'm looking at the rules. Number 1, well, I'm not going to go through each of these. I'm going to sort of just give you a way of looking at them in groups. Number 1 and 2 both involve separating items in a series. So it could be words, phrases, clauses. It could be adjectives. Oftentimes you'll have things strung together and you put commas between them. And you may have learned that, let's look at for this first example under number 1. The band composed of Sheila, Beth, and Ali played at the wedding. You may have learned that that comma after Beth is optional. It's called the serial comma because it's in a series. I'm going to play it more conservatively and say that it's not optional. You need to have that in there. There are too many situations where leaving it out can render a bad reading of the sentence, and leaving it in never confuses the reading of the sentence. So just for the sake of clarity, we're always going to have that extra comma in. So if you've got 3 items in a series, you should have 2 commas. If you've got 4 items in a series, you should have 3 commas. Okay, so separated items is one sort of big grouping. Number 2, if you look at rule number 4. Use a comma before any one of the conjunctions and, but, or, neither, nor when it joins a pair of main clauses. Main clauses just means that you've got 2 complete thoughts. You got 2 complete thoughts joined by one of those conjunctions, then you need to separate them, because a conjunction can do other jobs, and you don't want to confuse the reader and say that maybe the subject in the first main idea is still doing the verb in the second. Rather, it's shifting over to a brand new subject. So you'll have a subject and verb on one side of the comma, a subject and verb on the other, and both of them stand as complete sentences. I think that was part of the comma video when we talked about independent clauses. That's just what that means. Look at number 5. We have a number of intro elements: introductory adverbial, participial, infinitive, gerund, all these weird phrases. We don't have time to go through each one of those. So instead, if you've got, we'll think about it this way. This is sort of a short cheat. If you have an introductory thing, it could be a single word, it could be a clause. If you've got an introductory thing that suggests a pause and then it continues, but that introductory thing it won't stand on its own as a sentence. You can tell it's still connected to the sentence. Then we want to put a comma after it. Let's look at some of those examples. When Rick finished his marathon, comma, he was exhausted. It's an introductory adverbial phrase. Now look at look at number 10, rule number 10. This is also a type of introductory element where you have a mild exclamation. Oh, I suppose you're right. Yes, we do carry laser printers. Same idea. You've got an introductory element. There is a pause there. You can tell. So we put a comma in. Okay. Let's look at number 6 and 7. They got these weird terms: non-essential appositives, non-restrictive phrases and clauses. We're going to lump those two together and just call them parentheticals. You guys probably know how to use parentheses, right? It's where a sentence flows along, and then there's a break where maybe some information is just sort of shoved in there, and then the sentence continues. And you use parentheses, those bracket type marks, to put around them to say that we're going to pause for new information and then we'll continue. Right? That's called a parenthetical. That's all these are. Look at number 6. Hope, the leader of our group, was an articulate young woman. Really what that sentence is about is Hope wasn't an articulate young woman. And then you have added information just shoved in there. So we put commas around it. So commas in this case act a lot like parentheses. We'll run in later on when we go over dashes. We'll see the dashes kind of do the same thing. They make it parenthetical. Look at number 7. Same idea. Max Weber considered bureaucracy to be the most important feature of modern society. Now I read it without the parenthetical. So I just cut out that clause that is describing Max Weber because it's just added information. Now how do you know whether or not you can put commas around it? If you can do what I just did, if you can remove the clause and the sentence is basically the same thing, it has the same meaning and it doesn't mess up the grammar or anything, then you put commas around it. It's sort of optional. So a comma is a way of, or 2 commas is a way of offsetting it and saying that this is parenthetical. Look at number 8. There are a number of sort of conventional uses, separating dates, days from years, and house addresses from cities, and cities from states, and countries, etc. They just take practice. Again, the main idea is separation. If you look at the second one, do you know who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C.? Okay, those commas might seem a little arbitrary, like they were just randomly thrown in there, but they're not. It does make sense. We have a house, which is the White House, obviously. So the house has its own identity, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. It needs to be separated from the city, Washington, and that's separated from the state, or in this case, the district, right? District of Columbia. That's why you'll see, anytime you see a city and state together, like in the last one, they lived in Chicago, Illinois for many years. Illinois always has 2 commas around it because it's separating itself from the city of Chicago. So again, we're thinking separation. The rest of them, let's see, let's look at, how about number 13? Use a comma to prevent the misreading of a sentence. It's kind of a general idea that sometimes commas can help to put a pause in so that the sentence doesn't get accidentally read the wrong way. To Carol, Tom was a hero. If that comma wasn't there, you would have to back up. You'd read it one time. You'd have to back up and say, okay, there's no such person as Carol Tom, right? There's a separation there. You would figure it out if you're a good reader. But the comma helps you not have to read it twice. Same thing with the next one. There'd be 2 numbers right next to each other if you didn't have the comma there. So that separation is helpful. Sometimes you just got commas because it helps the reader understand what's being written. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, so flip over to page 64. This is a skill builder for today. There are 35 questions. In this red book, you need to write your answers somewhere else. My suggestion would be to get a notebook. If you're showing these answers to mom or dad or whoever, it's a good idea to have them organized so that they can flip it open and say, this is Tuesday's work. You've got everything in one spot. But you cannot write in the book, because I need these back. We use these each time. Okay, so for this one, you do not need to write out the whole sentence unless you want to. It might be helpful for you to do that. I don't usually require my students to do it. I just have them show where the comma goes. So if you want to write the word and then the comma after it, I've done that. You'll see after you do this when we review it that sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes if it's, let's say, an interrupter, a parenthetical, where it's a group of words that need commas around it, I'll put the first word, ... the last word with commas on both sides. As long as you're consistent and it makes sense, I don't really care how you present this, just as long as you're working through it. Okay, so here's your 2 steps that you need to do before you, or as you work through this. 1, show where the commas go. Now, a lot of these are going to have more than 1 comma, but it's only going to involve 1 rule. So you're not going to have multiple explanations. For example, number 1, we can do this one together. Number 1, my mother, sister, aunt, and brother left for the seashore. Now you can hear you've got some things listed together. Because they're listed, we want to separate them. So we put a comma after. So maybe you write out mother, comma, sister, comma, aunt, comma. and your answer could be items in a series. That's good enough. So you can use answers, as long as you can explain it. You can use your own words. You can use, like I said, the language that I've sort of walked you through. You can use the actual rules if that makes sense for you. I'll probably refer to specific rules as we go through the review. I think that's it. Go ahead and take some time to work through it. So pause the video now and then turn it back on and we'll go over it. Okay, let's work through these. Number 1, we did that one together. Number 2, first comma, that's an intro element. Number 3, chocolate, comma, pineapple, items in a series, similar to number 1. We're going to have groups of answers, and you noticed this already probably as you went through them. They're sort of grouped almost by rule. So number 4, we have items in a series also. Now in number 1 and 2 we had nouns. Actually, number 1 we had nouns. I guess number 3 is nouns also. Here we have adjectives. So 2 adjectives together, both of them modifying cumulus clouds, so we want to separate those. 5 is tricky. This is not items in a series. This was a trick. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. The speaker there is referring to a group of people, and he's addressing them directly. So this is direct address. He's addressing them in 3 different names. That was Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. Bonus question. Number 6. Potatoes, comma, candy, comma, items in a series. Number 7. No, comma. You could call that a mild exclamation. You could also call that an intro element. Number 8, a well-known physician. This is inserted in, so you could call this a parenthetical. You could call it, it's a type of interrupter. It's a non-essential. It's a non-restrictive. It has a lot of different names. As long as you can tell that this thing that's in there, that phrase, a well-known physician, is added in and needs to be separated out, then it really doesn't matter what you call it. Number 9, we've got 2 main ideas, 2 independent clauses. So we want that comma before the conjunction. Number 10, introductory phrase or introductory element, comma after the word match. Number 11, items in a series. Number 12, this one was tricky because it required you to actually add another piece of punctuation. Jamie is only 5 foot 8 inches. That's a complete idea. So we need either a period there, or even better than that, it would be a semicolon, because these 2 ideas are real closely connected, and that's what a semicolon does. So you may have put a comma before, however, and after. Problem there is you've got a run-on sentence now. So you need something stronger than a comma to separate between 5 foot 8 inches and however. But you definitely need a comma after the word however. Number 13, intro element after roads. 14, comma after school, intro element again. And you can see in 13 and 14 those clauses are very similar. Like, it would just make sense to put a comma there. You can hear the pause real clearly. Number 15, intro element or mild exclamation. 16, comma after diet, an intro element or intro phrase. Number 17, now this, however, is an interrupter. It is a parenthetical, right? It's inserted in, so we want commas on both sides. Number 18, we have a parenthetical phrase, the late film actress, commas on both sides of it. Remember, we want to treat it like parentheses. Number 19, this one's tricky. You've got an intro element. Actually, now I'm going back on myself because I said there was only 1 rule in each of these, but this one actually covers 2. If you come home early is an intro element, right? Like we've seen on a few of these. The word Alex is direct address, so you need a comma after each one. Number 20, this is a dialogue or a direct quotation, so we want to have a comma between the identifying phrase or tag and the quote itself. So comma after called. If you read a lot of fiction, and you read it closely, you should be good at these, because dialogue, you find a lot of dialogue in fiction, and a lot of commas, a lot of dialogue tags, identifiers. 21 had 2 after the word athlete, and then the quote picks up again, so we need one also after the word John. 22, this is also direct address or direct quotation, so after the word screen but before the quotation. 23, and notice where the comma goes. The comma goes right after the word concentrate, and then you have the quotation mark. Okay, number 24, who were born there gets commas around it, commas on both sides. Now, let's look at 24 more closely. If we were to read it without the commas, it would sound like this. My parents who were born there visited Scotland last summer. That sentence all by itself sounds like I've got more than one set of parents. My parents who were born there visited Scotland last summer. My parents who weren't born there have never been to Scotland. Right? So adding the commas creates meaning in terms of who you're identifying. And that's what we mean by restrictive or non-restrictive. If we have the commas taken out, and it's just my parents who were born there, who were born there is identifying the parents. It's saying that it's these specific parents, implying that there are other parents that you've got who were not born there. That doesn't really make sense. That's why we need to be careful about how we put our commas in. 25. This is 2 independent clauses, 2 main ideas joined by the conjunction or, so we want the comma after job. 26. The well-known singer gets offset by commas. It's an interrupter or a parenthetical. 27, looks like 27, 28, 29 are all these conventional uses where you're separating dates and cities and states and things. So I'll just run through these quick. 27, we want a comma between the day and the year, so after 23. 28, between the city and the state. 29, we need commas between Beirut, the city, and the country Lebanon, and between the day, June 14, and the year, 1985. Number 30, this is a direct address, or a direct quotation, so we want one after ended, but then we have an intro element inside the quotation also. Sincerely gets a, or you could call that a conventional use also. Sincerely gets a comma after it. 31, looks like 2 independent clauses. There we go, sorry. 2 independent clauses, 2 main ideas joined by the conjunction but, so the comma goes after play. 32, which has a floral print is added information. It's a parenthetical, non-restrictive, non-essential. It has all kinds of words. It's very confusing, but we want commas around it. Same thing with 33, whom I have known since childhood is just added information. 34, same idea, who is a fine carpenter, gets commas around it. And 35, which is well constructed, gets commas around it. Anytime you see the word which, you want to be thinking a comma goes in there. Okay, that's it. Hope you had fun. We'll play again soon. Bye-bye.